Hello everyone. Nice to see you on my channel, Touching Stories. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure, true, brutal, and kind. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things when we get them. I wish you an enjoyable watching time. The autumn wind was picking up and tossing garbage, scowling along the riverbank, as if it were dissatisfied with something. Apparently, it sensed the mood of a man strolling alone along the embankment. He was dressed discreetly, inexpensively, but warmly, so that the chilly weather would not interfere with his thoughts. For some reason, James liked old-fashioned hats with fields and old coats. In the fall season in these clothes, he looked like some kind of detective or journalist from the 70s. He was not a detective, much less a journalist, and he considered those professions unworthy. James was a surgeon. The workload in the state hospital was enormous, so lately he liked to relieve the stress after work with such solitary walks. It was especially hard on days when a patient was dying on the operating table, which alas happened. His way of calming himself down was quite simple. Water, or rather contemplation of it. Calm flow of the local river soothed, cast thoughts on the frailty of this world, and distracted him from the daily bustle, which had become an endless struggle with death for human bodies, and as a consequence, soul. A black melancholy overtook the surgeon. Some would say it was a midlife crisis, but not long ago, James had been content with his life. He had everything one could want. A wife, a job he loved, which was also his vocation. He didn't make money the meaning of his life, and they strenuously shunned him for that reason. Yes, he was not wealthy, always attracted by asceticism and a minimum of household comfort, and nothing else was needed. His wife, Alexa, had been with him since he became an intern and shared his high ideals and unpretentious lifestyle. Though she tried to occasionally make him a human being rather than a free scalpel, as she teased, he did not resist, but he did not express enthusiasm either. He didn't care about the exuberance of the patient lying on the operating table, so there was no piety for other people's wealth. Because of this, in private clinics, where he was strenuously promoted by his wife, he did not stay, and every time he returned to his old, shabby city hospital, where ordinary people almost prayed to him for his talent. Alexa was sincerely jealous of the doctor. "I haven't believed you for a long time. No man in his right mind would spend the night at work." The wife was indignant. "Alexa, sunshine. There is a job, and then there is a vocation. So, it must be so in my case too." The doctor shrugged off the attacks of his wife. He didn't like conflicts in general and avoided them in every possible way, considering them a waste of time. Alexa didn't have enough of it, apparently from an excess of free time. But what's the vocation of saving people? You know, people have died, are dying, and will die. But you and I don't live. I'm tired. I want a real family, children after all. But even children are a luxury we can't afford with your schedule and our income. What's wrong? With our money, what's wrong? There isn't one, you know. With your talents, we could not live in this shabby room, but like white people, closer to the capital or even in Moscow itself. Do we need it? You know I'm not a friend of money. And you don't have to be friends with it. You have to earn it. But we're not starving. But we don't live either. I'm ashamed to talk to my old friends, to put up with their mockery, because you were the best on the stream, and you got the worst job. So you just buried your talent here. So what? You're being held by people who need help, or maybe the pretty nurses are holding you back. My wife found a new reason to get angry, and the quarrel took on the features of a jealousy scene. For me, you are always tired. It means you have on the side. They assist you well. The modest surgeon in life blushes. Alexa, don't give me that. I am faithful to you and only you. But I do get tired. And you see how devastated I can be after hours of surgery. I see how you save everyone but your own wife. but you love me and I love you." Tiredly, the surgeon smiled at his wife, whom he truly loved, and at such moments he really felt guilty before the woman of his life. Yes, otherwise she would have long gone and been happy, and so tormented, James would go over to her and hug his wife tightly. At this point, the quarrel usually died down, and so the years went by. And then this year, his Alexa couldn't take it anymore. She had a lover. She became cold to him, and having suffered a little for the sake of formality and the resulting remorse, she confessed to everything. Naturally, it was James's fault for working, for not paying attention, for not giving gifts. Claims were pouring out of Alexa's mouth like a cornucopia, and he sat there in silence. There was an emptiness in his soul. In many ways, the woman he loved and who had betrayed him was right, except for one thing. He did not betray. He did not destroy. They did not destroy. The divorce was finalized quickly, since there were no children in common. There were no common property that they would not have divided amicably. Now the surgeon had only one job left, and it was the only thing that did not let him disappear into the abyss of depression. He would take on any operation, day and night at work. On his rare visits home, he noticed that his apartment was overgrown with dust and looked like a huge wolf's den. By the fall, the pain of loss had faded a little, and he began to devote more time to practice, to the delight of the staff, who knocked down to assist in surgeries, but the unhealthy enthusiasm of the chief sometimes did not share it. And so James came to his melancholy meditations. On this day he thought especially. He had once pulled a 50-year-old man from the afterlife who had almost killed himself with typical male indifference regarding examination, and so neglected that he needed emergency surgery. James didn't immediately notice someone tugging at his sleeve, at first hesitantly, then more insistently. The man interrupted his musings and looked toward the source of his anxiety. Before him, in the middle of the deserted embankment, a girl of about 6 or 7 years old was standing and looking with her eyes. She was holding a piece of paper with some child's drawing in it, and from the pockets of her coat were sticking out multicolored pencils. She was not dirty or soiled, but she looked poor because of her clothes, which did not fit properly, and in some places were also patched up. She looked as if she had been picked up. "Hello, Uncle. Buy a picture. You're sad. Maybe it'll help you," I tried, honestly. The little beggar turned to the man. The doctor realized that the girl was just a beggar, but it was extremely surprising. The child did not want to beg for money. She was trying to earn money at such a young age. The man appreciated in people the desire to work honestly and to get money for their work honestly. He was like that himself and therefore respected people close to him in spirit. "Hello, girl," the doctor smiled sincerely. "Well, if you tried, I'll buy, of course. Just don't spend your hard-earned money on any crap. I do not have much, but I give all that I have. I do not have much, but I give all that I have. I agree, of course. You're kind." With a serious face, agreed the girl. He didn't have much on him. He barely managed to scrape together 500 rubles. He was expecting his paycheck by the end of the week, but he had some groceries at home. James walked to work, and so he figured he'd get by for the rest of the week. He handed the little girl the money, and she gave him the drawing. Sparks of gratitude flashed in the child's eyes, and the girl ran to the nearest bench to draw her next masterpiece. The doctor did not linger any longer on the promenade. The child had filled the day with a light mood, and now the doctor had an abiding desire to go and do the cleaning of his den. The surgeon mechanically twisted the child's drawing into a tube without even looking at the contents, appreciating the child's simple desire to earn, but not a talent in the fine arts. He put it in his pocket, deciding to attach it to the refrigerator, regardless of the contents, not to throw away the child's efforts. Let the child's hand be a reminder to him that there is still much good and light in this world. James didn't think at the time that a simple child's drawing would be the beginning of a series of events, because most people just threw away similar crafts, even though they too appreciated children's work. He came home, brewed some coffee, and made himself some sandwiches. The doctor remembered the drawing and decided to evaluate the little girl's talent, and looking at the drawing was dumbfounded. He was utterly mortified. The beggar girl had talent. Yes, there was still a lot to do if she got into art school, and he sincerely wished her that. Such goodness should not go to waste. It must be honed and guided by the hands of a skilled teacher. And yet, the girl was a primitive, childish, but still a solid composition. The drawing represented a domestic scene, on the one hand, typical of the environment in which children live in dysfunctional families, and on the other, it made the hair move, seeing the kinds of human stuffing surgeon. The child depicted a man with a bottle and with a beautiful inscription. Vodka at the table and a woman in a wheelchair. The most interesting thing was that they weren't really a man and a woman. The child had apparently seen too many fairy tale pictures and interpreted the man and woman as animals. So the man was a sad bear, which bared its teeth at the chanterelle, a woman who smiled ingratiatingly at the bear. Something else reminded me of a picture from a children's cartoon. James realized that the child's mind was compensating with images of animals for the unsightly picture of reality. A drinking father, probably a stepfather, and a mother in a wheelchair. It was an unattractive sadness. Compared with the young artist's misfortune, his own problem seemed easy for the man to solve. At least he was a grown-up, established man. What could a little girl solve? The next day, James went to the same place with the goal of meeting the girl again. Apparently, the place was lucrative, for she was pacing the same neighborhood, unsuccessfully attracting indifferent people rushing about their business. In the doctor's mind, the girl was now, for some reason, associated with a little dodgy mouse. Greetings to the young artist. Greeted her James. Oh, hello. The little beggar jumped up and down. She was so used to being ignored that it was a surprise to see her. I liked your drawing. You did. The child looked incredulously at the essentially unfamiliar man. Usually my drawings are thrown away. No, I've got a place of honor on the fridge. He smiled. Are you the first person to say that? People don't care, even if they help. Yes, I understand. But I wanted to ask you something about the picture. Isn't that your mom and dad? You didn't just think of drawing animals like that, did you? Didn't you? That's right. The little girl mumbled a little and looked at the older man. The child was already suspicious of her surroundings, expecting a catch, but not help. I don't want anything bad for you. I don't want anything bad for you, as the man tried to reassure the girl. My name is James. You can call me Uncle Slava, and I'm Ann. Uncle James, you guessed it, you uncle. And you're the first one to ask. None of the people really look at my drawings. You try, you get an award, you keep trying. And my pictures go in the trash. I've seen it myself, but that's okay. I like to draw. And the pictures of my mom and stepdad. Stepfather, then, James muttered. Yeah, he drinks a lot and growls at me, and my mom like some kind of wild animal. We're scared of him. He makes me beg, and my mom has allowances, which he also drinks away. And we are hungry. There are no words. I don't want to beg, just draw pictures. Drawing is better than begging. Good girl, you're good, but why is your mother in the baby carriage? Mom got hit by a car. She's beautiful. But 6 months ago, she was walking from the store in the evening and was hit by a car at a crosswalk, and the culprit was never found. And now my mom only gets around in a wheelchair. I love her very much. She's the prettiest and kindest. And she doesn't have a daddy or a mommy. How's that? She told me that she lived in an orphanage. It's a place where kids live who don't have dads or moms. There was an awkward pause. The doctor feverishly wondered what he could do to help in this situation. Despite his experience in the many human deaths that had passed through his operating room, he had not become callous and was still capable of empathy and a desire to do good deeds. It was this trait that had once led him into medicine. Now it was pushing him on a strange adventure. Anyone else would have turned a wink to himself and gone on. No one owes anyone anything. But what would this girl's fate be if she grew up in a world where no one owed anyone anything? He will at least try. Anya, why don't we make a deal? About what, Uncle What? Why don't you take me to your mother? I'm a doctor. What if I can help her? What if I can help her? Aren't you cheating? Why would I lie to you? We'll swap. I'll try to cure my mother, and you'll draw a nice picture of you and your mother running around in return. Do we have a deal? James smiled. Do we have a deal? The girl smiled, and there was hope in her eyes. And her stepfather started hitting my mom a lot. Anne handed the man a picture of a wolf pulling a bunny in a stroller, and the latter flying to the floor with a frightened face. The doctor took a few breaths of exhalation to calm down and calm the rage that came over him. It wasn't much of a walk. The girl, of course, tried to choose a neighborhood for her art sales, though familiar but away from home, so as not to be embarrassed in front of her acquaintances. The girl's neighborhood was the industrial outskirts, where stories like hers were plentiful. Half the families lived that way. As soon as they entered the entryway, the stench of alcohol hit the nose. The doctor was sure that this was just the tip of the iceberg. Syringes, cigarette butts, and garbage were just out of his sight as he walked in from a bright street into an unlit room. James had been more fortunate than Anya in his time, and he didn't grow up in those ghettos. But at school and as a student, he often had to fight the bullies, the wolves who grew up in these kind of shabby panel houses. Anne fumbled with the keys and after a few moments turned the key in the lock. At that time, a cigarette butt tossed by someone flew down from the upper floors. The apartment hallway wasn't much different from the entryway in terms of furnishings and contents. The same cigarette butts underfoot, the same filth. The difference was the wallpaper, probably from the last century, which had, however, long ago become a palette of human untidiness. Grease stains, streaks, dirty blotches, and occasional flecks of blood made up the pattern of this dysfunctional dwelling. James marveled at how a child could grow up in such a filthy place. Was this girl to blame for the adult's stubborn determination to degenerate into animals? A disgruntled, hoarse male voice was heard from the kitchen. "Yan, what did you make so early?" After which James' doubts about where the last 500 of his budget had gone disappeared. He felt disappointed that his good deed had gone to waste. After all, there are people who are not worthy of these deeds. In the corridor appeared the owner of the voice, a man about the same age as the surgeon. He really resembled a bear and a wolf at the same time. The bear was a large, heavy figure, which was more fat and puffy than muscular, which was more fat and puffy than muscular, with a face swollen from constant drinking. He got his wolf's thick graying hair and his eerie eyes with red streaks. "Who'd you bring, you little brat?" "Well, I'll give you one," he roared. The girl hid behind their guest and looked out fearfully from behind their guest and looked out fearfully from behind the man's leg. The man moved toward James, who, though he had an imposing figure, was wiry and trim, as he considered it right for his body to exercise regularly. He became an obstacle in front of his stepfather, extended his arm forward, and he bumped his solar plexus against his open palm. "Well, I'll give you one," he roared. The girl hid behind their guest and looked out fearfully from behind the man's leg. The man moved toward James, who, though he had an imposing figure, was wiry and trim, as he considered it right for his body to exercise regularly. He became an obstacle in front of his stepfather, extended his arm forward, and he bumped his solar plexus against his open palm. The surprise and the doctor's firm hand made the alcoholic exhale noisily and cough. feeling the strength and resistance which he was not used to. The man slowed down. "Who are you? You come into my house, and you put your hands all over me. Who the hell are you?" "I'm here to see the girl and her mother." "What? She's got a lover without getting out of her baby carriage." "Well, I'm her." The stepfather's eyes filled with blood. "Hey, man." He looked incomprehensibly in the direction of the doctor. Apparently, the smells of alcohol did not leave his unwise head. "Stand back," White James warned him. "You've got some nerve." There followed a torrent of foul language, as if this semblance of a human being knew no other words. James didn't listen to the rest of the angry outburst and punched the boar in the face. He didn't try his best, but it was enough to make the stepfather fly back into the bowels of the kitchen and turn his head incomprehensibly. He wanted to get up and fight. "I won't warn you a second time," remarked the surgeon. The alcoholic did not listen. I had to give him another good crack, and through the stench of a hangover it became clear to him that this gaunt guest was no match for him. This ain't no handicapped man with a daughter to beat. This is where you fight back. This is where you fight back. James picked up the man by his T-shirt, in which he continued to sit among his spit and cigarette butts. Battalions of empty bottles could be seen behind him, as if the man was parading them around. In fact, they were the main utensils on this kitchen. "Now listen up, Scarecrow. From this day forward, the rules change. Are you ready to listen?" He wasn't ready and once again tried to resist. He ended up with a busted lip and a bloody nose. James struck carefully, correctly, so as not to break anything unnecessary or injure his hands. The doctor still had surgery to do. "Ready now." A slurred mooing sounded like agreement. The man nodded and continued. "Then remember a few simple things that will keep your soul safe and sound. First, you will never lay a hand on the girl or her mother again. I wish you'd think about how pathetic it is to beat the defenseless." The man snorted grudgingly, but remained silent, and blood trickled from his nose in 2 streams onto his T-shirt. "Second of all, I don't want to see this mess. You're the one who's going to make this place shine. Aren't you ashamed to turn your apartment into such an abomination?" He remained silent and shook his head. James shook harder, almost getting blood drops on his favorite coat, and the man nodded in agreement, saying he understood. "Third, you won't send the kid out begging anymore. You want to eat, you go and work. A girl shouldn't have to work instead of a healthy, clueless man." This time there was no objection, and the surgeon let go of the heavy body, which settled on the floor, but then stirred and disappeared into the bathroom. He looked back at the girl, who was looking at James like a princess at a kind dragon that had just devoured all her abusers. The child didn't believe it could happen. Nor could James himself believe that he, a doctor accustomed to saving lives by fighting disease, was now the one who had punched the face, albeit of a downcast, but still human being. "Take her to her mother," the surgeon asked. The girl almost jumped up and down and rushed into the next room. "Mummy, mummy, 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 we've got company." A ringing child's cry echoed through the apartment. The doctor wanted to believe the best. Otherwise, why start anything at all? He walked into the room and stood upright. "This can't be," he whispered, amazed. A pretty, middle-aged, physically exhausted woman was staring at him restlessly. Bags under her eyes, worn-out houseclothes, and a generally unsightly appearance. But if you look closely, it was definitely her. The doctor seemed to see a ghost. So look at the greeting from the past, the first love, something distant, warm, that is not returned. Except that James had had one love too, and she had cheated on him not so long ago, after which she divorced him. And this woman was familiar to him from his professional life. Not so long ago he had already operated on her, but at the same time the woman somehow did not recognize him. "Hello," she said. The voice also sounded like that patient. He performed her surgery a year ago. The operation was complicated but successful. He remembered such things involuntarily almost forever. The doctor could now name any operation he had performed and remember its specifics, and he remembered this woman as well. "Excuse me, but I operated on you a year ago." Instead of a greeting, the astonished doctor said, "As I remember, you recovered quite quickly, and now you're in the chair." "How so?" The woman looked at him as if he was crazy. "Man, what are you talking about? Who are you?" "Mom, this is Uncle James. He also gave me money for my drawing." Anne started, but her mother stopped her with a gesture. "Wait, honey, give me and Uncle Slava. Yes, let me and Uncle Slava talk. Here, take some money and run to get some bread." The woman handed her daughter a handful of coins. The girl took the money and disappeared down the corridor. The woman looked at her and fixed her eyes on the man. "Explain yourself, please. Is this the first time I've seen you, Uncle James? What operation? What do you mean? I've never had any surgery." "Yes, there's a problem with my spine. You can see that, but I don't have the money to treat it." James thought about it. There were indeed inconsistencies in the whole story. He remembered that the stepfather, when he and the girl had entered the apartment, had called Nastia, while the patient's name seemed to be Helga, another inconsistency, and they had different social standing. Then the surgeon was still surprised that the rich woman went to him in a public clinic, not in a private one, as the rich people like, but she was persistently recommended him as an excellent specialist, which was quite common in the surgical practice of men. "I'm sorry, I must be mistaken. It's just that you look a lot like the same patient. It's not uncommon." "My name is James. Forgive my impoliteness. I was very surprised. I'm a surgeon." "Perhaps I can help you," said James. "Why would you do that?" Miss Jane asked. "I honestly don't know. I'll just say that your daughter helped me to brighten my life with her drawing. She has talent, and it shouldn't go to waste. Let's call it a matter of conscience, if you will," but the doctor explained. "Well, that's not a bad explanation, even in spite of all this." The woman glanced back at the apartment, hinting at the mess it was in. "Okay. In a nutshell, I was going through a rough divorce, and the drawing brought me out of my autumnal melancholy. Now your story. Anne told me you were an orphan. What a blabbermouth. She'll say anything." The woman pretended to be indignant. She looked thoughtfully out the window at the heavy gray sky and the chimneys of the factories in the distance, sighed, and began her story. "I guess you could call my life mediocre. Orphan. I spent all my conscious childhood in an orphanage. When it was time to go free, I got a job at that factory. Just like the natives of the nearby district, saved up for an apartment. I had a fiancé and was born in love. We didn't get married with my fiancé. Why, they say in our turbulent times when everyone is getting divorced. The groom waved goodbye and disappeared into the unknown. He even quit his job and left town. He was not ready for fatherhood. So I dragged my daughter alone. It was hard, but I managed. It was my decision, but 6 months ago I was walking at night. The street lights here don't always work. Maybe that's why the driver of that SUV didn't see me. Anyway, I was hit. I'm alive, as you can see, but it's not much use. That is, we have not much use. That is, we have not much income, only expenses. This one." She pointed to the door. "Takes everything and drinks it all away." She hoped for a man's shoulder, but got a man's bottomless throat, from which there is no help. If it were not for the nurse, we would have starved. I can't kick him out. The wheels lose out to the big man, though. My daughter and I get it when we try to talk sense into him. That's why we still put up with it. Don't worry, you won't have to anymore. Don't worry, you won't have to anymore. The doctor grinned. Well, if it is so, because I have no strength to endure it anymore. If it weren't for my daughter, I would have had it long ago. Don't do that. You're not a little child. You're a grown, strong woman. James stopped her. Yes, you're right. Jane, let's make a deal. I'll leave now. There is much to do, and alas, little time. This man will have time to make the apartment look pretty. Don't strain yourself. He will do everything on his own. We have an agreement. I don't want to get your hopes up, but I'll see what else I can do. Don't give up hope. You and I will dance again. Smile cheerfully. Jane responded with a pale smile. She didn't believe it, but she wanted to hope. On his way out, he met Anya, who had just come home with bread. He stopped, stroked, and gave her a few bills from his rainy day stash, which he decided to gut for a good cause. Give it to your mother, and this is for your groceries. I'll be back to see you this weekend. Keep an eye on her and don't forget to draw. Just draw whatever you like, okay? The girl nodded and pressed herself against his arm. Uncle James, don't go. I have to, baby. We have to. Don't worry. It'll be all right. I believe you. The girl smiled and closed the door behind the departing guests. He wondered at the striking resemblance between the rich patient and the woman in the wheelchair. An accident. Accidents are not accidents. But after all, even in an orphanage, it doesn't happen that siblings are separated. This was contrary to ethics as James understood it. And yet, despite all his idealism, the doctor allowed for that option as well. As soon as he got to work and had a free minute, he rummaged through a year's worth of reports. A crazy idea occurred to him, and he decided to try to realize it by pulling up the medical records. The surgeon found what he was looking for. Miller. The same woman was looking at him from her wheelchair. The difference, though, was in character. In the file photo, Helga had a more defiant, confident, direct look. No sadness, no distrust, no depression. So they might well have been sisters, and that added intrigue to the story. The flywheel that he, James, had unwittingly spun. He wondered how it would end. Finding out Helga's residential address was the first time James had ever taken a day off, much to the surprise of just about everyone he had worked with over the years in providing fodder for gossip, given his recent divorce. Being a doctor has its own undeniable advantages. For example, if you saved a person's life, he would be very likely to be grateful to the savior, if not the kind of person who is used to only demanding, but not the kind king. Fortunately, it turned out to be the kind of people whose wealth and social status does not spoil. So when I saw the doctor on the doorstep of my house, I was just surprised. James, hello. I didn't expect to see you. Hello, Helga. Of course, a hospital is not a place to which people are anxious to return, said the man reasonably. Why are you so quick to say that? Good people are always welcome in this house, especially if they come with good news. You do, don't you? If you are worried about your health, I am, strangely enough. Without news. So you know best. That's not what I meant. You know, in the hospital you could not intrigue as much as now. Helga smiled. Helga smiled. Come in and meet the parents at the same time. We're having a little family dinner tonight. Oh, that's just perfect. I won't even argue with you. Come on. Let's go. Mar and the Millers turned out to be a mature couple, and most reminiscent of James's school teachers. Their intelligent appearance, manners, and literate speech were indicative of a cultured upbringing. In fact, they were businessmen who owned, though not huge corporations, but stood firmly on their feet and bailed out multi-million-dollar turnovers. However, there was no arrogance about them, and they accepted him as one of their own after meeting him. Although, in fact, the doctor was a stranger to them. Over tea and buns a conversation ensued. Mother, it was James who advised me. A wonderful man and just a talent. Made an advertisement for the mother of the woman. To be honest, we've really heard a lot of good things about you and your surgeries, Victor remarked. I just like helping people. And that's what you're known for, too. Your unselfishness. And that's what you're known for, too. Your unselfishness. And in our time where most people have money above all else, that's very rare. Unfortunately, that's true. But as they say, we were born to make a fairy tale come true. The doctor remarked with a smile. I have for you, gentlemen, just a little tale. I have for you, gentlemen, just a little tale, a short one. But I think you will be interested. Go ahead, don't be bored. Helga's gaze flashed, and James told of his acquaintance with the unusual girl and her family. When he got to the part about the stepfather, Helga interrupted him. "I hope you're not going to jail." "No, I'm a surgeon." "Remember? Well, the most interesting thing happened when I saw a live fox. Now please exhale and get ready." "Ready. I saw you, Helga. At first I thought it was a practical joke. After all, it can't be that a rich, successful, and most importantly, quite healthy girl is suddenly in an apartment with an alcoholic man, and even in a wheelchair. If this is not a joke, then you have intrigued us. Except it's not very funny." Daddy talked. Imagine how I felt. It's impossible for one person to be in such opposite states, and it was. I began to remember and about the operation a year ago, to which Jane, that's the name of the girl's mother, and made only round eyes. So I had a suspicion, which I decided to confirm or refute by coming to you. "Mom, Dad, I know that you took me from the orphanage," suddenly Helga answered. The parents looked at each other. They were obviously confused about something, and how daughter and documents should have been better hidden. Cheerful little devils gleamed in the girl's eyes. "How long ago?" "Yes, back in high school. I did not tell you not to upset you. My teenage rebellion went quietly, if you remember. And besides, I love you very much, and you are the only mother and father to whom I owe everything." The corners of Mary's eyes sparkled. "Thank you, my daughter." "Thank you, my daughter. Thank you, Mom, Dad. So my hunch was right." James muttered, "Your twin sister." "But it can't be," Victor protested. "We adopted one, Helga. You know the rule, Doctor. You cannot separate siblings. We didn't break the law. I'm not accusing you of anything. I just want to get to the bottom of what happened, and I hope you'll cooperate. And you will get it. We are now interested in finding out how it happened. I think we can go to the orphanage and find out. Well, not today, but still. Yes, there's one more thing I'd like to talk about afterwards. But not now. I'll leave now, as I have a lot to do. When would it be convenient for you to visit the shelters? Leave your personal number. I'll call you and we'll arrange it." Took them a week to get to the orphanage. The doctor had a difficult period with a lot of surgeries. Literally every day someone came in who was especially grave, and it was necessary to save the patient urgently. In between rescuing patients, the surgeon kept thinking about the girl and Jane. How were they? Had the stepfather listened? Or did he think the danger had passed, and he could abuse her again, defenseless? He himself could not understand why the fate of this small family had become so close to him. After all, they were nothing to him. A talented artist girl and an unlucky orphan mother. The influx of patients dried up suddenly, and James allowed himself a second time off. It was Friday. Victor was waiting for the doctor in his foreign car outside the hospital. The businessman shook the doctor's hand. "Hi. Now there will be even more whispers about me in the hospital. It's a henhouse of medicine. What do they have to say about you? I went through a divorce over the summer. Now they are constantly introducing me to someone, so they expect that I will urgently find someone to pair with me, as if you cannot live without it," complained the surgeon. "So would have found." "Wait, and you're not Jane out of interest by any chance?" Victor grinned. No. I am married twice. My first wife left me, and the second is always with me. Surgery is mutual love." "All right, have it your way." "I agree that the profession becomes a vocation. If you have, as you put it, mutual love. One thing I don't understand is why. With your talent, you don't like making money so much. That's what my first wife said. She's right in her own way. But she knew who she was marrying in her day. I'm amazed in a good way at the nobility of your soul. I have tainted mine with business, as you see, and this unpleasant situation with my sisters. Well, at least you're trying to make up for it. Yes. What's more, I want to spend the paperwork you hate for the benefit of that girl who can't walk. Would you be able to get her back on her feet if I got what she needs? It's a matter of honor. Well, then we'll take it as a deal. There's the orphanage. They drove up to the building. It was an enormous building, several stories high and crushing, and the very sight of it was unpleasant. It was not pleasant to look at. It occurred to them that it was even more disagreeable to live in it. On the spot, it turned out that the former director had long since retired, and the younger one was happy to help the men. You say the twin sisters might have been separated? Alas, after all these years it all came out, James put in. Well, perhaps, though I'm surprised to hear it. Rules are rules. I don't see what would have made the old principal go to the trouble of separating the sisters. The clerk muttered more to himself than to visitors. Of course not. He had only recently taken over, and it would have been a nuisance to be taken over, and it would have been a nuisance to begin the headmaster's career with a scandal of this magnitude. He may not have been involved, but his predecessor's actions cast a shadow over the entire service. We do not know the motivation of the past director, but it is important for us to know the truth. Don't worry, we have no claims against you or the orphanage, Victor said. Look at the date of the adoption of Miller Helga. And now look at the girl with the name Jane and the same date of birth. The clerk nodded understandingly and rustled through the papers. His face stretched. Indeed, here's the record. One date is a perfect match. Now, I'll check it again with the date of admission. The men waited patiently, though they knew the answer to their question and realized that everything would be confirmed. The doctor was the first who could not endure it. Let me distract you a little bit. And where is the former director now? If you wanted to restore justice, you are a little late. The former director died about 6 months ago. His heart couldn't take it. If he gets out that he was really into separating brothers and sisters, then I obviously wouldn't feel sorry for him. It's either good or nothing about the dead, but that's unforgivable brutality, I think. The director showed the tape. It all checked out. Helga and Jane did indeed turn out to be half-sisters. Victor went pale. What have we done to you? You knew nothing. James tried to reassure him. Yes, but they knew. But the principal asked us if we were ready to have 2 kids. And Mary and I clearly weren't financially ready for that at the time. So we said no to 2 at once, but the principal interpreted it in his own way. The goddamn doomsayer. The new boss was not happy. You could tell he meant it. Thanks for your help. Have a good day. They said goodbye. Victor and James were the employee of the orphanage and hurried to leave the walls of the institution. Helga was clearly worried. James put his hand on hers to reassure her. The trip through the industrial ghetto had impressed the girl, and she was worried in advance about the condition of her sister, of whom she had not even been aware the week before. You know, James, my conscience troubles me, she confessed. But why, it's not your fault, is it? Yes, it is. It could have been her. I owe everything to my parents. They raised me, taught me, gave me a start in life. If you put it in my place, the result would have been the same. If you put it in my place, the result would have been the same. We're like 2 peas in a pod. You do look alike, but people are different. Maybe in your own way you are right, but we can't change the past, and we can change the present. Well, let's change it then. Well, I'll share some thoughts that I think are important, and then we'll go. All right, and we'll go. All right, I'm listening. I haven't been there since that first day, so I don't know what the situation is now. Further, I don't know how Jane will react to your appearance. I haven't warned her. Anyway, you and I are going to be one big surprise. A huge lump of snow over our heads in the middle of summer. Figuratively. So let's be very careful with the girl and the mom. They've been through enough. Okay, I'll try. The difference in the upbringing of Nastya and Helga was evident already when the doctor and the businesswoman went into the entrance. From the sudden unsightliness of the place where her sister lived, Helga squeamishly cringed, but quickly suppressed the feeling and confidently crossed the threshold. What a perfume! Helga, congratulations. You have learned the aromas of moonshine, the doctor laughed. Let me go ahead. Please, I'll show you the right apartment. They went up to the floor and tried to ring the bell. It did not work, so they had to knock. From behind the door came an unfriendly voice. Who? The doctor in the coat. Open up, man. Muffled curses were heard from behind the door, but he still opened the door and left for the kitchen with a disgruntled look, without even looking at the doctor who entered, and he didn't notice the lady who followed him at all. Otherwise he would have been very surprised. Apparently, the doctor did not run the risk of damaging his hands on his stepfather's face for nothing, because the apartment was indeed transformed in the direction of cleanliness. Yes, the walls were still caked, but cigarette butts, spit, and assorted trash were gone from the dwelling. About the bottle battery, James, I didn't have time to estimate, because the bear had closed in his den in the kitchen. Anne jumped out of the room to meet the guests when she heard the familiar voice. Uncle Slav, it's you. I thought you weren't coming anymore. Oh, Mommy. The child's eyes grew as big as a saucer, for she saw a copy of her mother, richly dressed and walking smoothly on her feet. She smiled at the girl. Hi, you're Anne, right? Yes. And I'm Aunt Helga, your mother's sister. See how much we look alike. Only you're not in a stroller. A pet peeve of incredulity still made me look at everything new with caution. You can show Aunt Helga your drawings later. And me too. I missed you and your mother a lot, the doctor intervened. I missed you too. I'll get the drawings. All right, little one, take them to the kitchen. And don't say anything to your mother. Let Aunt Helga tell her herself. The girl rushed into the hall and returned to the corridor with a hoe. Album took the man by the hand and led him into the kitchen, where the stepfather was in grief. He was not driven away, though. Helga sighed heavily, like an athlete before a standardized test, and went into the room from which the girl had just come out. Man, do not worry. I won't hit you again, James reassured the alcoholic. Did you do everything I asked? Anne. He didn't hurt you anymore. No. Uncle Jacob is not angry anymore, and he even quit drinking. He's cleaned up. Thank you for curing him. The girl gave her verdict. Jacob smiled cheekily, but that was clearly not the doctor's fault. Jacob, he held out his paw. James, I really owe you a thank you. I was wrong. Damn vodka. You know, I can understand everything except making fun of the defenseless. Aren't you ashamed of yourself, a healthy forehead, to send a child to beg? I was, but I'd have done anything on a hangover to be honest. Yeah, I know I'm an asshole, but look around. Where do we live? Us, you, for example, live in the apartment of the people you beat up and forced to work for you. Uncles don't fight, the little artist interrupted the men, scolding. You'd better look at the drawings. I drew the whole album in a week. The doctor carefully scrutinized the little man's work. The animals hadn't disappeared from the pictures. Just now it was not fighting, drinking, or quarreling, but quite adorable episodes. What about the bear with the broom, who even smiled? Or the little bunny sitting on the balcony and admiring the birds in the sun? Autumn was not sunny, and the birds, for the most part, flew away to warmer climes. So she just transferred her mood on paper. The child was happy for his mother and painted her a bright image. Was Mom waiting for me? She was waiting, and I was drawing. The doctor laughed and looked at the picture. The fox had her hands on the windowsill and her head on her hands and was smiling like a dentist's dream, with all her 32 teeth. The picture smelled warm and made the doctor's heart skip a beat. Then he saw himself as a fluffy rabbit wandering along the riverbank in a hat and cape. The girl had added sunglasses to the rabbit for more mystery. Do I really have such big ears? James laughed. The girl smiled embarrassedly. James came from the next room. One of the sisters called out to him. He came in. It was obvious that they hadn't discussed much, but that they were both crying, you could tell, to say for sure. Jane looked helpless and doomed, but with hidden joy. Helga seemed even more confident now than she had been before. The doubts that had plagued her in the car were as if they were gone. James, you've already done an incredible thing, judging by the actions and their consequences of the last half of the month. But I have one more question for you. It was as if she was gathering her thoughts and waiting for a hint from the outside. So ask. I'm sorry I didn't come to greet you. I wouldn't be here right now, I think. She blushed and lowered her gaze in an attempt to hide a modest smile. She was very embarrassed by everything that had happened. Until a week ago, she had seen only one way out of all the troubles that had come upon her. And now she had hope for a relatively normal life and a sister. Having a sibling meant a lot to an orphan. Doctor, I remember how well you got me back on my feet. I have a question as to whether you could do the same for my sister. I'm not interested in the cost. Jane must walk, and I will do my best to make sure that she does. The doctor replied, no less firmly. Jane, how ready are you for the treatment? I am ready to try. I'm only afraid that my daughter has no one to leave her with. I don't want to see Yasha in this apartment and in my life anymore. He may have reformed, but I can't forgive him for his past sins, and I certainly won't leave my child with him. The stepfather stood silent at the door, and every word struck him as hard as his fists. He had already hoped, when he saw his rich sister, that now they would live with the help of relatives, while he was being treated like a dog that had been beaten. He was offended, but he also understood his wrongdoing. Forgive me. I was a jerk, he groaned and left the room. I think that if you are willing to trust me with your life, I can manage with the child. Besides, she can often visit you in your room during rounds. I'll take care of that. I'll take care of the expenses for our young artist, James said. Well, now it's just a matter of a few things, since we've so cleverly agreed to make things happen. Helga summed it up when they had said goodbye, and Helga was driving him home. The woman asked, still don't understand you, James. What is it? Why do you personally need all this? Good deeds don't go unpunished. The slightly sad surgeon smiled. He didn't know the answer himself. Anne turned out to be a smart girl and caused almost no trouble, except for having to take her back to her old school, since there wasn't much time to transfer. She knew how to take care of herself, warm up meals, keep the house in order while the doctor was away at work. And she was an assiduous child who drew all day long and was interested in books, which the doctor brought her almost every day. The girl was developing, and this thirst for knowledge inspired the doctor himself. He was the same as a child. Only drawing was not given to him. In a word, there were no problems with the child. But he had enough help because the house became a living space for him, not just a box of furniture where he came to sleep. As for the girl's mom, she took the surgery surprisingly easily. And the problem in terms of medical practice was quite typical, complicated, but typical. And the treatment algorithm was also worked out, so he was confident. And at the time of the surgery, his hand was not shuddered. It all took 5 hours, which the patient safely slept through. Then there were several months of rehabilitation when she was taught to walk again. How could an orphan and single mother have imagined that, in her distress, she would be visited by a kaleidoscope of relatives who, on the one hand, were strangers to her, and, on the other, regularly visited her, and on the other, regularly visited her and undertook to provide for her all her needs, although they were under no obligation. In the evening, she cried softly into her pillow with tenderness, as she was used to in the orphanage, so that no one would hear, and therefore not consider her weak. The days passed, Autumn changed to winter. The chimes echoed, the frost screeched away. Spring began, and the thaws Jane also met in the hospital. For her, the window still showed the world, which was barely changing in the direction of warming. She entered the hospital in the gray, dank autumn and came out in blooming April, as if reborn to life. She felt like a migratory bird that had returned from distant lands to her native land and wanted to sing and dance, though it was the latter that the doctor had not prescribed. The doctor, by the way, walked beside her under her elbow and was also satisfied with life, as if there was no such melancholy which brought together such different people in its time. "I do not know how to thank you for all that you have done for me. You saved me. You saved me," the patient began to wail, "from the dreariness of living and watching crows in your industrial park. I remember you told me that every day, but now you can thank me," smiled the doctor. "In what way?" "In honor of your discharge, there is already a dinner to which you and I have been invited. Helga also mentioned that she would like us to meet the young man. She met a month ago. Can you imagine how many good things are happening at the same time?" "But I don't even have anything to wear," she said with embarrassment. "But we have a whole day to fix this unfortunate fact and the money I've saved. I don't know how I'm going to get it all back. Did I ask for a refund?" The girl and I agreed to barter for drawings. And financially, I am not frugal. So even from a small salary of a doctor in a public hospital, I managed to save a considerable amount every month. And now we have a surplus again, and now we are going to spend it. Do you like evening gowns? What is an evening gown? The woman made a joke. I've never worn one. The hour came. After that, the doctor, the girl, and her mother spent the day going shopping and buying all sorts of silly knick. The little artist asked for her own paints. Since she wanted to try a new way to paint, not all pencils scratched the paper. Jane chose a chic dark blue dress, which advantageously emphasized her slender figure. And if someone unfamiliar now looked at this trio, he would be sure that an ordinary family had gone shopping on a day off. The doctor felt really happy, not like after surgery, when he was tired and devastated, but happy that he had saved someone's life. No, he was happy now, and filled with that happiness. He wanted to spend that kind of time indefinitely. At the end of their clothing shopping excursion, the trio stopped by the amusement park, where the girl had her first and vivid experience riding the merry go-round, then the Ferris wheel, and jumping on the trampoline. A satisfied child was inspired for the year ahead. By evening, they were pretty tired from the day's adventures, but enthusiastic enough to go visiting. Helga and Mary had done their best to prepare a kind of festive dinner. The table was full of goodies, as if it were not a humble evening, but some kind of a village wedding that would be celebrated for several days. At the very least, there was no way those present could have eaten all the food prepared that evening. Everyone was just waiting for Helga's boyfriend. They were partners in a related business, so their future union promised not only great pure love, but also business development. But Oliver, like a little girl who had just received a New Year's present, clapped her hands at Helga. "Jane, come, let's go meet him. Let his eyes be wide open." Jane supported her sister, and they went down into the yard. Both were beautiful, dressed up. Only Helga wore a red dress like fire, and Jan wore a blue dress like fire, and Jan wore a blue dress, more relaxed. The parents were also excited, as they had not yet seen their daughter's chosen one. When Jane saw the black SUV, she knew it was the car that had hit her. With her sideways vision, she noticed the license plate number. It couldn't be. It was a shock to the barely recovered woman. "Are you all right?" The girl noticed the change in her sister. "Not really." "What is it?" "I can't tell you yet." "Tell me this is the car that hit me in the crosswalk." "It can't be." "I remembered it clearly. I got the impression you were jealous of me, sister." The girl tried to make a joke of it. In the meantime, the rest of the party came down into the courtyard. Victor admired the car and did not fail to admire the car upon meeting them. How was it in terms of reliability? It is an excellent car. I last serviced it a year ago, and it was just little things. The bumper was fixed. The handsome young man told me passionately. They call him the Masters of Life. What about the bumper? Yes. A dog jumped out on the road. Didn't have time to slow down. That's when Jane spoke up. What a coincidence. Just a year ago I was hit in a crosswalk by the same SUV. The young man went pale and remained silent. The girl gave him the license plate number. Oliver was shocked. He had nothing to say since it was really him. But he dared not deny it, only moaned quietly, "I don't remember anything." There was a dead silence at the table. Subsequently, Oliver wrote a confession about drunk driving and hitting a pedestrian. Under pressure from his parents, he paid compensation to the victim, lost his driver's license, and the girl's goodwill. As for the rest of Jane's life, it was connected to our doctor. They began to spend more and more time in each other's company every day until they realized that they had become a family. The girl was only happy about this and quickly began to call the doctor Daddy. This status was unusual for a surgeon. He learned another kind of honor, to be a father. The girl continued to develop her talents. And when she finally enrolled in an art school, teachers marveled at how self-taught she was able to discover her talent. She was promised prizes and exhibitions in the future. The girl laughed quietly and said that she just had a lot of inspiration. The motifs of her paintings were cute family portraits of animals, and the fox stood out with a distinctly rounded tummy.